It was dark and dreary. What kind of place was this? Really, light man. But what is happening remains a mystery. Someone was shouting loudly the name Linos and that the research had been successful. But who was Linos, and why was everyone around him rejoicing? Someone began to loudly congratulate the ruler of the magic tower. It turns out that Linos is the ruler of the magic tower. She had heard this name in a novel she had recently read. It was the heroine's magic teacher, and his appearance was exactly the same as in the description. If it is Linos in front of her, then she has become the heroine of the novel. But if that is the case, then what kind of character? The room is luxurious and Linos is very happy with it. Was she really the main character? If she had known, she would have read the novel to the end. The only thing she remembered was that the main character had a hard time. It seemed that despite this, the ending was happy. Wait, there was something wrong with the hands. Or rather, they were missing. Linos was very happy. He introduced himself as Dad, the dad of the newly hatched penguin. The girl transformed into a character that has characteristics of both a human and an animal. A novel called Mr. Wolf, You Can't Eat Her. Half human, half wolf imprinted his mark on the main character who treated him. The so-called mark is a characteristic of the heir to the blood of the first wolf beastman. A one-sided love contract that forever binds the half-beast to the object he imprinted. Of course, it looked romantic in the novel. For the object, he did not hesitate to commit crazy acts, literally love bordering on mental illness. After being imprinted, the protagonist becomes obsessed with the protagonist. The girl read this novel in her past life until she died. Fortunately, she remembered the content of the part she managed to read, but she read only to the middle. She did not understand very well the nature of this work, except that it was a novel. Linos greeted his pet. Since it was an Adelie penguin, they decided to name him Adelia Penguin. Even if he was a beast man, she didn't understand what kind of romantic fantasy a penguin could be in. Judging by the characters around her, she has definitely transformed into the beast man from the novel Mr. Wolf, You Can't Eat Her. The problem was that she was not reborn as the main character, or even as a character in her entourage. Not even a penguin born from the natural union of a female penguin and a male penguin, but born in a magical laboratory. At first, she was very sad, but after a very short time, she completely adapted to this penguin life. Her dad, Linos, had a lot of responsibilities, but he always found time for his beloved penguin. He had been carefully raising her, born from a magical egg for the last 4 years. An elite buffet exclusively for penguins. Chic clothes just for Adelia. A penguin pool and everything just for penguins. Daddy showered her with love she had never experienced in her past life. However, if she could turn into a human, she would want to go back. Especially Adelia felt lonely when the dark night came, so she sincerely wished and believed that even animals could become beastmen. Adelia wished for this every day, but her prayers did not affect the standards of this world, and no matter how hard she tried, she could not acquire a human form. The same cannot be said about Linos. He was incredibly happy that his beautiful daughter was an ordinary penguin, because he truly hated the beastmen, as he remembered being persecuted by the beastmen as a child, and he actually felt a terrible dislike for them. Because in the original, purebred humans are looked down upon as an inferior race. The man who first loved her, she didn't want him to hate her. Linos noticed that his daughter was sad. He immediately began to worry that something was hurting her. Just when Adelia had accepted everything and come to terms with reality, that guy showed up. He knew Adelia as the same penguin child that Linos said died and could not survive. Suradel, a human killer whale from the Vale family. The appearance of this guy sounded like an alarm in the penguin's head, and not because his face was overly handsome. She didn't understand how he could be a secondary character. There was something suspicious about Suradel, because the killer whale should have black and white hair, and his was surprisingly silver. Obviously, this was a cliché, or there was some secret origin. What was even more suspicious was the Vile family. In the original, they were a minor family with no explanation, but here they were a family that conquered the continent. And also a character with such a hair color. Didn't that mean that his appearance distorted the entire original plot that Adelia knew? Yes, a human could change the original narrative, but she, being a penguin, would be unable to do anything if the main content of the novel changed. Suradel was extremely surprised, as he was a penguin lover, but for the first time he saw an individual that was not afraid of him at all. Lanos clarified that by penguin lover, the guy meant that he was not averse to eating tasty penguin meat, in which case everything fell into place, because killer whales eat penguins. And that was what was strange about him. The guy laughed and said ironically that, unfortunately, he had never tasted penguins, but that was all temporary. Suralel leaned towards Adelia and said that since she was not afraid of him, they could become good friends. He touched the penguin's cheek, which she didn't like at all, and she tried her best to show it. If Adelia didn't like the touch on her cheek, he decided to try touching her beak. The penguin was ready to bite the impudent guy on the finger, which is what she did. Even this did not frighten Suradel. The more he looked at Adelia, the more he liked her, especially her crazy eyes. At that moment, she realized that her action would lead to something undesirable. After the first meeting with this guy Suradel, he came again and noticed that the penguin had a very passionate look. The guy admitted that when Adelia looks at him like that, he gets embarrassed. The next day, he came again, saying that he felt like they were getting closer. Suradel was already so close, he thought, that he asked permission to call the penguin Leah. He came to Adelia's house every day. She still couldn't understand. Wasn't he tired of it? He didn't care that the penguin openly expressed her dislike for him. Come to think of it, he used magic when she bit his finger. It was unusual for a beast man to be able to use it, as in the original story. Magic was only available to pure-blooded humans. Her father told her that the Vale were the only family of beastmen who used magic, an ability only available to pure-blooded humans. It was very strange. Adelia had no idea what would happen to her while she was trying to figure out the true nature of Suradel. The next morning she woke up as usual, but there was one big change. She woke up as a human. Adelia was very surprised and alarmed by her sudden transformation. Even though she really wanted this, she was now worried about whether her dad, who hated beastmen so much, would be able to accept her. She didn't want her dad to see her like this, so she thought about how she could quickly turn back into an animal. Before Adelia had time to do anything, she heard her dad's voice calling her for a walk, if she had already woken up. With tears in her eyes, the girl decided to take this step. She decided to run away until she found out how to transform back. So she decided to leave for just a while, but when she woke up, she realized that someone had kidnapped her. Adelia overheard the kidnappers talking about how they had struck it lucky to have captured the beast man the Velas wanted so much. The feature that made them so happy was that the girl had black and white hair, which was what they needed. The Vale family couldn't quite believe that the beast man they were looking for had been found. Suradel opened the cart and saw her there with frightened eyes, Adelia. The girl could not believe that the guy knew everything from the beginning. That was why he came to her every day, and that it was he who ordered her kidnapping. The only thing that seemed strange to Adelia was his face. Suradel called his mother to see for herself, and the woman was horrified by the way the girl was being treated. The woman's name was Bella. She was the head of the Vale house. She immediately asked her son to free the tied child. He began to free Adelia, asking if she was in pain and repeating how sorry he was. This reaction seemed very strange to the girl. She even assumed that it was not his doing. Looking into Adelia's eyes, Suradel said that she seemed familiar to him, as if he had known her for a very long time. The kidnappers were about to leave when Bella stopped them and asked with anger in her voice who ordered them to bring her like that. After all, they were looking for a fellow tribesman, not a criminal. She demanded to know why they had brought this tender child so rudely. She ordered the guards to immediately seize and imprison these criminals. Turning to Adelia, the woman regretfully apologized for what the girl had to endure. The head of the Vale house introduced herself and then asked where the girl's house was so that she could get her back safely. It seems that they were really looking for a child similar to her, but did not want to bring her to the estate in this way. But Adelia still has not learned to turn into an animal, and if she returns to the magic tower now, it is unknown whether her father will take her back. The girl turned to Bella with a request to teach her how to transform back into an animal from her human form. She said that she was initially in the form of an animal, but suddenly became a human, but does not know how to return to her original form, so she cannot return home yet. At the end, Adelia added that she does not want to hurt someone dear to her, which is why she cannot return home yet. Bella warned the girl that it might take some time, offering to live with them until she could turn back. In fact, they were looking for a child similar to Adelia for one reason, The woman could no longer have children after one accident, so they spent decades looking for fellow tribesmen so that their line would not end. As a result, the woman was unable to find anyone who looked like her, let alone her fellow tribesmen, and this was decades from now. Adelia's appearance was like a miracle, so Bella really wanted to help her. The girl didn't quite understand what the woman meant, but one thing was clear for sure. They needed her. Adelia agreed, but it still seemed strange that Bella was so worried about her. It felt like she was missing something important. Looking at herself in the mirror, she found a huge number of similarities with the head of the Vale family. Black hair, white inclusions of a similar shape, and even white hair on the inside. Finally, Adelia realized that these people mistook her for a killer whale. They definitely thought she was a killer whale like them. Before that, she was not herself. And then, looking at them again, she understood everything. Bella and the girl looked very similar. The spots of the killer whale and the penguin were similar, but at least their location should have been different. Adelia knew she had to pull herself together for the sake of her worried dad, get used to the image of animals as soon as possible, and come back. She really didn't want to deceive these people who had treated her with such kindness, but the girl didn't know if it would be appropriate to admit right now that she was a penguin. Adelia didn't know what to do if they found out the truth. Then what would happen to Suradel? Her thoughts were interrupted by Bella, who said that they still didn't know her name. This question again left Adelia stumped. She didn't know whether to tell the truth or not. Suradel intervened in the conversation and suggested calling the girl Leah if she didn't have a name. The head of the Vale family liked the name very much, but the woman asked Adelia what she thought about it. The girl exhaled with ease. She already thought that she had been figured out. But what was strange was why exactly the name that Suradel had given her when she was a penguin. The guy said something that Leah clearly didn't expect. He admitted that the girl he was courting was actually named Leah. These words angered the girl, and besides, she was not a girl, but a female penguin. The guy came close to Leah and asked, more importantly, if she was afraid of him. Having looked at Suradel more closely, the girl suddenly realized that he was actually quite nice. She almost fell for his looks but came to her senses in time, asking why she should be afraid of him. Adelia said that she had nothing to fear. Suradel wouldn't eat her. The guy smiled slyly and asked where she got that idea from. He came very close to her, gently tucked her hair behind her ear and told her not to worry, as he did not touch creatures of his race. Suradel said that he likes gullible people. The girl suddenly started screaming that he was a fraud. True, the guy had always been like this, even when Adelia was a penguin, but she couldn't understand why he continued to act like this. Looking into the girl's eyes, Suradel said that he really liked her voice. Now he liked Leah, standing in front of him, much more. It was a disaster, and it was not for nothing that my father always said that there was no cure for madness. Over a cup of tea, Suradel reported to Bella that he had asked the staff to show Leah to her room. The woman was interested to know what her son thought about this girl. He noticed that a little time had passed since the humanization, but the communication, surprisingly, went smoothly. Bella agreed with her son. The girl was too good to live like an animal. The woman suggested that Leah's mind had matured when she was still an animal, but that was bad, because the higher the intelligence, the greater the mental pain. Suradel wondered what the chances were that the girl was lying, since they hadn't even seen her in animal form, but Bella was sure she was a killer whale, looking at her hair. It didn't look like they were painted or had magic applied to them. What really alarmed the woman was that her son called the girl by the name of the penguin he visited. Suradel didn't give any clear answer, except that he simply liked the name. Bella didn't understand what the guy was thinking. He couldn't have fallen in love at first sight. In any case, they decided to let Leah stay in Vale and watch her from the sidelines. It seemed strange, but Bella had a feeling of confidence that the girl was right for them. She thought that the killer whale race was over, and now there was hope. Suradel still could not understand why his mother was so obsessed with her family. The fact of being the last representative of this family caused the woman to feel more responsibility than she had expected. As long as Bella was alive, she promised to do everything in her power. She didn't want to experience this terrible feeling anymore. One way or another, now there was a humanized child, and Suradel did not want his mother to shift all the responsibility onto him. The woman promised to help Leah adapt to society and meet a good man, and her partner did not necessarily have to be a killer whale, and she was not obliged to give birth to their kind. At that moment, Suradel thought that his mother was writing him off because he was also a killer whale. Did she really not expect anything more from him? Bella remembered her son's words that he didn't even think about marriage. From his eyes, she realized that it seemed Suradel had fallen in love at first sight. The guy began to justify himself by saying that this was impossible, unless his mother herself wanted him to enter into a relationship with someone. Bella asked her son to come closer. When he came closer, she took and hit him on the back of the head with her hand. The woman was angry that her son was thinking about breaking up before he even started dating anyone. She asked Suradel if he regretted meeting her and Frimo. With a smile on his face, the guy said that he didn't regret it at all. Bella was glad that her son understood everything and gave him instructions to go with Leah to the shopping street tomorrow. The girl will stay in the mansion for some time, so she may need a lot. Leah will be able to buy everything she wants. Bella was not going to go with them, as Frimo would soon return from the estate, so she wanted to prepare in advance to meet the owner of the house with the servants. Suradel listened to his mother and went to invite Leah on a date. The woman shouted after him that there was no date. He was going there as a security guard and a banker. Until now, Adelia lived and considered her house the best. She really liked the room that Mrs. Bella gave her. She was tormented by her conscience for having gotten everything through a lie, but she still truly became a human being. Wavy hair with a unique pattern, blue eyes reminiscent of the color of the sea. It was all very beautiful, but what Adelia really couldn't understand was why she looked small and weak. Was this really the limit for penguin genes? Before the transformation, she was above average in height. She was only holding back because of her beautiful face, and besides, it was a miracle achieved in only 4 years. How she missed fingers instead of wings. It's good that she became human now. Adelia decided to check again what she would have to do as a human. First of all, find a way to turn. All this time, she has to try to avoid Suradel and the Beastmen killers, and also Dad when she was a penguin. Something always worried her. What she was worried about was how to find a way to save her father. According to the original story, a plague that only affects pure-blooded people will soon spread. The plague spreads so quickly that it shakes the world, and in the end, the only pure-blooded person left alive is the main character, Amelia. So Adelia's father will also die from the plague, and then the plot tells of Amelia, who is left alone and upset about the loss of her only teacher. There was a knock on the door of the girl's room. It was Suradel. The guy asked permission to enter the room. Adelia asked what happened, that he came to her with a smile on his face. Suradel answered that he came because he missed Leah. She couldn't understand anything at all when she was a penguin, and now why the guy was so willingly interested in her. Was he really one of those people who hits on every first girl he meets? Adelia was sure that now attacks on the appearance of this cute boy would not work on her. She decided to ask what interested her. Being a penguin, Suradel was a beast-man killer whale. Why then did he have silver hair and was too short for a killer whale? He said that it was difficult to determine the type of beastman by its appearance. Only beasts of certain races had the same characteristics. That's why Suradel was sure that Leah was a beast whale. She was just short. The girl still began to argue with him that the killer whale's beastmen have a similar hair color. Don't these animals belong to those very specific races? The guy said he would tell me why this was happening, but a second later, with a smirk on his face, he said it was a secret. This made Adelia very angry. She considered him an idiot who was constantly making fun of her. Suradel really liked Leah's unusual reaction, and at the end he added that it could be considered that hair is a gene mutation. The girl demanded to show her because she didn't believe it. The guy couldn't believe his ears. Adelia demanded that he show himself in his natural state right now. Suradel took off his clothes. Without taking his eyes off the girl, he asked if she wanted to see him in such a natural state. Adelia started screaming for him to put his clothes back on. She wasn't talking about this state, but about his beast-like appearance. Exhaling with regret, the guy said that he thought that Leah wanted him. His jokes made the girl very angry. Suradel offered a deal. She shows her true form, and he shows his. The girl reminded him that she didn't know how to address him, in which case the guy promised to wait until she learned. Suradel thought that Leah was a beast killer. She could not reveal who she really was. Even if she learned to turn, she would still never see the guy's true appearance. The girl was afraid to imagine what would happen if this guy found out that she was the same penguin from the tower. Suradel came close to the girl and whispered in her ear so that she would not worry. He was more patient than he seemed. After Leah finished her business, the guy promised to go with her to the lands of the Vale family. There was an island surrounded by the sea. Since he considered her a killer whale, it would be much better to train with comrades. The girl could not believe her ears, because if she was seen during training on the island, she would not be able to escape. Her anxiety was drowned out by the penguin she saw on the seashore. Leah suggested training simply in the mansion, but Suradel rejected the idea, as it was pointless without water. Taking the girl by the hands, the guy said that her mother would be sad if she heard this, because killer whales cannot be content with small places. Adelia was confused. She didn't know what to do. Since she planned to return after learning how to behave like the beastmen, she decided that before going to the island, she needed to learn and escape. If the killer whales can't be content with small places, then how does the Vale family live in a city house? The girl asked. Suradel said that the people of the Vale family stay in human form longer than others, and in addition, using the magic of movement, they can go to their territories. It was for this reason that most of the servants were from a different clan, and there was also the fact that there were almost no beastmen of the killer whale clan. The beastmen had to periodically return to animal form. Otherwise, they would become very tired and turn into an animal. Adelia remembered that in the original, the Vale family couldn't move in the middle of the street. They had to turn into animals when going to the island, so they couldn't stay in the capital for long. The wolf beastmen with their excellent physical abilities became knights. The elephant beastmen with their distinctive manual dexterity became masters. Fox beastmen with their graceful appearance became the main characters of scandals. Leah's thoughts were interrupted by Suradel, who asked the girl why she called him that. Adelia didn't understand what was wrong. Should she really call him young master? It turned out that he didn't mean such a formal address, but something a little more tender. Leah interrupted him, saying that if he wanted to hear sweet words, he could hang out on the streets. Suradel smiled, saying that there was no greater bliss if she would call him that, but he simply wanted an affectionate address. The guy hinted that he and Leah should start getting closer, but the girl pretended that she didn't understand what he was talking about, citing the fact that they had seen each other today, and that was more than enough. If so, Suradel asked what Leah's first impression of him was, and the girl briefly said that it was bad. He looked into her eyes, as if pulling her towards him, and asked if she really thought so. The girl today was also deceived by his face, as she said that Suradel was quite pleasant. This made the guy very happy, because he also liked Leah. The guy took some kind of stone out of his pocket and said that he wanted to give it to another Leah, but she left, so he gives it to her. Suradel said that his Leah likes this. The girl immediately frowned. She did not understand the phrase, "What does his Leah mean?" She thanked him, but refused, believing that it would be better for him to give this stone to another Leah, as he had originally planned. Approaching the window, Suradel stretched out his hand to throw it out, but the girl began to scream why he was doing this. The guy no longer needed this stone, since he took it out to give it to Leah, but the girl did not understand why he could not give it to another Leah, for whom it was intended. Suradel said something stupid that the girl didn't quite understand, like how he could give this stone to another Leah if she didn't like it, thinking that it would hurt her. The guy said goodbye to the girl, saying that it was time for her to rest, as she was tired, and that tomorrow would be a difficult day because they would go shopping. Because of her worries, Adelia could not sleep. She kept jumping up and screaming. A lot had happened today. But what struck the girl most was that Suradel had thrown an incredibly beautiful stone out the window. She couldn't understand why he had done it. It was worth admitting that she liked stones. Ordinary stones were to Leah's liking too, but she liked beautiful and expensive ones much more. One day, when she was a penguin, Suradel asked her if it was true that Adelie penguins liked rocks. Indeed, the peculiarity of the Adelie penguin was that he liked stones. The next day, Suradel brought the female penguin a precious stone. Of course, as a noble penguin, she could not ignore it. The girl couldn't get over the fact that the precious stone that the guy gave her fell into the flower bed. Adelia didn't know what he wanted to show with this, but she decided to quickly go down, pick up the stone, and return. Her eyes were filled with happiness and excitement as she rushed after that stone. The girl stopped abruptly. She could not understand what was happening to her. Her body ached, her head hurt. She felt sick. If you think about it, the night before she became human, similar things happened to her body. That night, Adelia also fell ill, but at the time she thought it was a mild case of flu. However, when she woke up, she became human. The last thing Leah thought was that if she became a penguin right now, her authenticity to the whales would be compromised. The sleeping penguin was discovered by Suradel. He knew this would happen. He carefully picked up the penguin, not understanding why he was overexerting himself like that when he didn't know the state of his body. In her sleep, the girl heard a gentle voice similar to her father's. In fact, she was very scared because she suddenly became a human, left home, was kidnapped, and that she hid her essence from the whales. Adelia's greatest fear was that her father would turn away from her when she was born as an animal, and she was overcome with despair and fear. For her dad was the person who was the first to understand what family love is. He was her whole world. Leah began to think that if her father was gone, how would she live on? Even if she was a prisoner, she begged her not to abandon her. Suradel gently hugged the penguin to himself, reassuring her that everything was okay and she was safe. The guy assured her that everything would be fine when she woke up. Adelia woke up to the bright sunlight. She felt so heavy, as if something was lying on her. Opening her eyes, she couldn't believe them. Suradel was lying next to her. The girl couldn't understand why this young and crazy, tall and handsome guy was here. Could it be that this asshole had gotten into her bed? Waking up, Suradel gently brushed the hair from Leah's face and, smiling, asked if she had really missed him so much that she had come to him. The girl started shouting throughout the room that she was in her room. A second later, she looked around and realized that this was not the room she had received from Bella, but she didn't understand why it was here, since she had fainted in the hallway. Besides, she seemed to have returned to her penguin form, but how that happened was even more incomprehensible. With a hint of mockery in his voice, Suradel said that, of course, he was glad to see her, but it seemed to him that they were rushing things. Adelia began to justify herself by saying that she hadn't actually come here to see him, but then the guy asked what she was doing in his room, and in his bed, too. The girl began to say that she didn't remember anything. She fell asleep and woke up in his room and in his bed. Suradel suggested that this was a phenomenon, since prisoners who had recently become human sometimes showed symptoms of fever, and when returning to animal form, they saw hallucinations. It was unclear, but Adelia was sure that she had not been caught by the guy in the form of a penguin. The girl apologized for entering his room without permission, assuming that the guy was surprised and angry. With a smile on his face, Suradel said that he liked the fact that Leah came to his room without realizing it. The girl tried to explain this misunderstanding, that she didn't even know where the guy's room was, but he didn't give up, telling her that in that case, she came here at the call of her heart. In any case, Suradel decided to apologize for not being able to properly take care of the girl. She didn't understand why he was apologizing, since it was she who had entered his room on her own. Gently taking the girl's hand, Suradel asked if she had been enduring this pain alone all night. Although he understood perfectly well that he was not yet trustworthy, he still asked Leah to come to him, even when she was in a little pain. For many years now, since she had seen him every day, Adelia knew that the guy was really worried. However, she was here in the guise of a killer whale. As if doing her a favor, she promised that even if she got sick, Suradel didn't have to worry about her. The guy was holding some kind of bag in his hands. If Leah promises to help him in difficult times, then he will give her this bag. Adelia found out that this was her stash, which was taken away by the kidnappers. Suradel didn't ask her to promise just like that. He was really worried about the girl. It was all unstable, since she had only recently turned into a human. Leah didn't understand what was going on. Usually all the guy did was joke, but if he made that facial expression from time to time, she wouldn't be able to get used to it. The girl had to promise, although she had no intention of coming to him. Suradel closed the topic and suggested doing something interesting before breakfast. The interesting thing was that they had to teleport, since the guy needed to go to the school on business. Adelia was very happy to hear about the teleport, because before there was no need to teleport, because Dad had prepared everything that was needed in the tower. The girl seemed to find herself back in the original novel. Suradel extended his hand to the girl to teleport and leave faster. Leah had no intention of giving the guy her hand. She only touched it with her fingertips, saying that this would be enough for teleportation. Suradel laughed. He thought that the girl only had cute hands, but she also thought cutely, and her heartlessness also seemed cute to him. A split second later, they arrived at the training ground. They really did move in the blink of an eye. Adelia had only seen this in the Tower of Magicians. The girl noticed that the atmosphere around was filled with fear. Leah asked the guy if he had been frying the workers in a frying pan all this time. They all avoided him. Suradel asked to point out at least one person who was avoiding him. The girl didn't want to do this because she didn't know how it would all end. If Leah was unsure, Suradel suggested asking each one in turn. Adelia didn't want this, so she mentally apologized to the guy and pointed to the first one she came across. Suradel laughed, asking again if this was the knight who was avoiding him. The girl immediately began to change the subject, saying that she was simply curious, since this knight could be half-flying squirrel. The guy couldn't understand how Leah understood this. Because of this knight's physique, he didn't look like a rodent at all. She simply assumed that if he stretched those huge, broad muscles on his back, he could fly like a flying squirrel. Suradel only noticed that Leah called the knight's muscles huge, which meant she liked it. The guy admitted that he was a magical swordsman, and he also had the muscles that she thought were cool. That's why he asked her not to look at other fighters, because he was jealous. A magic swordsman could easily control a sword with magic. Leah considered it a fraud and a secret that was hidden in the original. Suradel could tell from the girl's eyes that she didn't believe him, so he offered to demonstrate. But she was against it, since the knights were clearly intimidated. Now the guy understood his companion's preferences. He promised to take all of this into account next time. Taking Suradel by the shoulder, Leah said that she didn't know what he had in mind, but she couldn't stand how he was mistaken in her preferences. That's right, the girl liked the muscles, but she liked the way the clothes fit on those solid muscles more than the large build and rough appearance. If you think about it, being a penguin, Adelia was noticed. That day, when she wanted to knock down the guy who was bullying her with one punch, the female penguin thought that he would be soft, since he was a wizard, but he turned out to be much stronger. Adelia caught herself thinking that if you excluded Suradel's character and took into account his body, face, and hair, then he was perfect. Without expecting it from herself, looking into the guy's eyes, she told him that he was perfect for her preferences. Suradel's heart began to beat so fast, as if it was about to explode. He was very glad that he was to Adelia's taste, but he liked her cold, sincere gaze directed at him more. The girl smiled and corrected Suradel, saying that she liked his appearance, but there was no talk of his character, and besides, she thought that he was colder than she was. The guy abruptly changed the subject, asking Adelia to play with the knights a little, since he needed to talk to the commander. The girl decided to stand still while she waited for Suradel and watch the training. Besides, time flew by while talking with the guy. Before Leah had time to enjoy her solitude, she was surrounded by knights asking if it was true that she was the new human killer whale that had joined. One of the knights asked a very strange question. He was interested in whether it was possible that Mr. Suradel was making fun of her. Adelia immediately denied it. She couldn't understand why he was asking such questions. It turned out that the knights had noticed that lately, Mr. Suradel had been laughing too much, since in ordinary life he was not a smiling person. The boys noticed that when their master talked to the girl, he laughed too much, and it seemed crazy to them. It turned out that Suradel only laughed when he enjoyed beatings disguised as sparring, when he made you run all day, when he made you wear your clothes back to front, or when he discovered something interesting. Adelia realized that this guy's interest in her person was just a mockery from which he got pleasure. It was natural for beastmen of the same species to be attracted to each other, but this was the first time Suradel had been so kind. The knights concluded that the boy fell in love at first sight. Adelia did not believe these words. She believed that Suradel's interest was not love. It was similar to the attitude when she was a penguin, because when a person sees something small and cute, it attracts in a natural way. The knight insisted that the gentleman's smile was different from the one he showed them, and he asked Leah if she knew her companion's nicknames. The knights called Suradel the laughter therapist. It turned out that if something happens or someone makes a mistake, then the master beats and heals, and so on in a circle. He was nicknamed that because he never lost his smile throughout the entire process. This guy turned out to be even more of a psycho than Adelia thought. She already started thinking about running away, since she is an animal. The The girl's thoughts were interrupted by Suradel, who suddenly appeared and asked if she had made friends with the knights and what they had talked about. Looking at the frightened faces of the knights, she couldn't let them down, so she lied, saying that the guys told her about how the gentleman was an excellent swordsman. The penguin's characterization was very playful, so the girl decided to tease him by asking him to show how he sparred. Looking at the knights who were trembling with fear, Adelia did not know who to choose. After thinking for a bit, the girl said that since all the knights were currently busy training, it was okay. The girl quickly changed the subject, asking what Suradel wanted to talk about. It turned out that he asked the leader to select a few knights to act as escorts for Leah, as they would be needed in the future. The girl didn't understand why she needed an escort. Suradel said they are a family of whales who are tasked with protecting the endangered orca population. Adelia didn't need an escort. She asked to be assigned a maid. The guy assured her that she should not think about anything, but just enjoy life. Besides, he was sure that the girl loved money, jewelry, power, and strength. This was all true, of course, but Leah started screaming that she didn't need any escorts. Indeed, the characteristic of penguins was that they love money, jewelry, power, and strength. Suradel compromised and offered to choose the girl one companion instead of 3. Adelia didn't care whether it was 1 or 3. She wanted to close the topic, asking not to nag her like a mother. But the guy responded to this too, saying that if she needed a mother, then he would be one for her. This made the girl very angry. She even allowed herself to say that she hated him. But Suradel reminded her that just recently she said that she liked him. Leah reminded him that he had only said that he was her type and nothing more. The guy covered his mouth with his hand in surprise, assuming that the girl only wanted his body. This conversation made Adelia lose her temper, and she started shouting that at what point did everything turn out like this? The knights watched this scene and found it amazing, as Leah was the first person other than Lady Bella to treat Lord Suradel so calmly. The guys had the impression that this couple had been together for 10 years, and not as if they had just met yesterday. Adelia had already had a hard time getting rid of the temporary maid yesterday, and with an escort, it would only be a matter of time before everyone found out she was a penguin. She didn't know what to do with this stubborn guy. The girl's eyes were drawn to the crazy, handsome guy. She immediately began to scream and point her finger at him so that Suradel would make him an escort. Adelia ran up to him and asked if he was a black cow. The guy confirmed it. It turns out that the girl heard about him from her maid when she was a penguin. The guy didn't know how the girl knew everything, but it was true. With her eyes shining with happiness, Leah asked the guy to be her escort. This request confused the knight. He asked the girl if it would be okay if someone like him accompanied her. It was a bit harsh of the girl to behave this way, but she realized what a stroke of luck it was. Knights like this could be fooled even with their eyes closed, and Adelia was very good at it. Taking this gentleman by the hands, the girl said that she liked him, or rather, that he was exactly the one she needed. Leah was sure that this man would not suspect anything even if she turned into a penguin, and this would definitely help her in her plans for the future. Suradel stood and watched this scene all this time. He became very interested in who this knight was who made the girl react like that. In her room, Leah introduced herself to her new escort, saying that she would be residing in Vale for a while due to circumstances. The knight's name was Hanu, and since the girl trusted him, he promised to give his life to protect her. The guy asked the girl to speak to him more simply, without addressing him as Sir. Adelia decided not to delay and get down to business. She told Khan that she had a personal request for him. In fact, there was a real reason why the girl chose Sir Hana. When she was in her penguin form, she had a devoted servant named Ypres, who often told her the story of her twin brother. Leah was going to contact Ypres through Sir Hana. The knight's personal request was his mistress's desire to meet his older sister. Hanu did not understand what the girl meant, since he did not have an older sister. Adelia couldn't believe it. The two looked almost identical. The photos almost proved the family ties. If you put them side by side, you get a combination of 2 types of excellent beef. The girl began to shake Hana, begging him to remember if his older sister's name wasn't Ypres. Finally, the girl heard what she had been trying to hear for so long. She was just a little mistaken. It turns out that her former maid was her younger sister. Adelia said that before she became human, she met his sister, but Hanu did not understand how this was possible being a killer whale. Taking the knight's hand, the girl began to tell him that she was actually very worried. She was very grateful to Lady Bella for her hospitality, but they were new people to each other, and the girl was in a new environment for herself. The girl tried to cry after saying that it would be much easier for her if she knew at least one person. Adelia felt terribly sad when she thought about her dad. She really wanted to see him and even go back to him right now. The girl was very scared because her father would hate her when he found out that she was a beast man, and she also had not found a way to cure the plague. Leah needed a person she could trust, and that person was Ypres. When she thought about her dad, she couldn't stop crying. Seeing his mistress's tears, Kanu promised to bring Ypres, even if he had to knock her out and drag her there by force. Suradel suddenly entered the room, and just then saw Leah and her companion holding hands in the middle of the room. His eyes filled with anger, he asked in a stern voice what Sir Kanu was doing here. Adelia had failed to clear up the misunderstanding between Suradel and Sir Kanu, and since she remained in Vale, she had to go to the city to buy everything she needed. In the clothing store, Suradel decided to inform his companion that he would be forced to reconsider Sir Khan as an escort knight. Leah tried to explain that it was a misunderstanding and they were not lovers, but before she could finish, she heard an invitation from her companion for a date. When refused, Suradel stated that he was not going to stand by and watch as they attacked her right after the girl gained human form. Leah warned that if he thought that way, then he should also stop behaving so obsessively. This conversation in raised tones was interrupted by the saleswoman, who asked if Leah was going to buy the dress she was holding in her hands. When she opened her bag, the girl realized that the amount of money her father had for emergencies was greater than she thought. Now she wouldn't have to worry about starving to death if the Vale family threw her out on the street. And besides, Adelia had secretly picked up the jewelry that Suradel had thrown out yesterday. In fact, the guy was worried about Leah. He was also going to buy her everything she wanted, but it seems that her attitude made the girl more ignorant and carefree. When the female penguin found out that Suradel was going to buy her everything she wanted, her attitude changed at the speed of light, and she agreed with him that if she was touched, it would be real trash. The guy gave her the go-ahead to buy whatever she wanted. Leah's eyes ran wild. She wanted to take everything. The peculiarity of the animal man penguins was that they actually enjoyed shopping. Suradel found this pastime pleasant. This was the very phrase that Adelia wanted to say. Another thing that couldn't help but please her was that the money could be left untouched in case of unforeseen circumstances. On the street, the girl saw people who looked like purebreds from the Magic Tower. They were looking for something or someone. Adelia saw her image. It turned out that they were looking for her. Adelia, the family of Lord Lanos. The people from the tower even suspected the madman from the Vale family. They knew that the guy loved penguins and came to the Magic Tower every day. The most convincing version was that Mrs. Adelia had turned into a human and ran away with the money. Suradel turned to Leah and asked if she had a bag of money with her. The girl couldn't understand why he was suddenly asking if he had really revealed her secret. Suradel said he needed to talk to her, but it wouldn't take long. The guy pointed to the carriage that was heading their way, saying that it was probably on some important business with him. The guy in the carriage didn't like Suradel, so it was worth being patient. Adelia exhaled. One way or another, she had not been caught, but the question was who was approaching them. The girl immediately noticed the stranger who got out of the carriage, tall and with a beautiful build. Before them stood Theodore, the protagonist of the novel and also the successor of the wolf family, which holds the greatest power among the wolves. Initially, he had an unapproachable and cold character, but after imprinting on the main character Anemone, he completely changed and became a person who experiences crushing love. Adelia couldn't believe that Suradel knew the main character. Theodore came to talk about the latest news. He knew that the penguin that his friend had been following had disappeared. He was wondering if he would leave everything as it was. Suradel replied that he had no time for that yet, as he was busy with a precious guest who had arrived to visit their family. The guy introduced that very precious guest with an imperturbable face. Theodore said that he couldn't even imagine what was so valuable about her, but Suradel explained that she was the very same killer whale that they had been looking for so long. Adelia was outraged by the main character's manner of speech. She knew about his impudence. But was he really such a rude person before meeting the main character? What was more important for Theodore was to find out from Suradel whether he was participating in the hunting competition next week. Every 5 years, a hunting competition is held among the leading families of the continent, the event that begins the novel and the place where Theodore and Anemone first meet. While hunting, the main character finds the wounded Theodore. Anemone, like her father, hates beastmen, but he evokes her sympathy, and the girl cannot pass by. As a result, the heroine uses special restoration magic to heal the guy. Thus, the hero, having fallen in love with her at first sight, imprinted himself on her. Now Anemone was busy looking for Adelia. She was the girl's father's favorite student. Even being a penguin, they got along well. Kind and loyal Anemone will certainly try to find Adelia. The female penguin was now worried about what would happen to Theodore if Anemone didn't have to, because he could die. There was only one way, and Adelia started to act. Asking him a question that could seem rude, the girl asked if her new acquaintance was by any chance one of those who fall in love at first sight. This question angered the guy. Looking at Suradel, he asked if all the killer whales were as crazy as he was. Adelia herself didn't want to ask this. It just seemed like the girl would have to heal him instead of Anemone, but she really didn't want Theodore to imprint on her. If this fact is ignored, the female penguin will feel guilty because Anemone did not come as she was looking for her. The girl started screaming that she was taking her words back. She didn't know about Suradel, but Leah wasn't going to tolerate abuse directed at her and Bella. Theodore was not going to listen to this any longer, turned around and began to leave, only saying that he would win this competition in any case. To which he received a response from Suradel that he was also interested in the main prize and would fight for it to the last. Kasatka knew very well that none other than the wolf family were ready to give their lives for those they imprinted on. These words made Theodore very angry. His eyes filled with rage because Suradel had the courage to touch the seal. He thought the idea of imprinting was very stupid. Baring his fangs, the boy shouted that he would not allow the seal to control his life. As far as Adelia knew, Theodore was the one who was most captivated by the one he was imprinted on. When the female penguin asked what the prize was for winning, Suradel said that it was the elixir of life. This elixir could heal most injuries and was excellent at neutralizing poison. It immediately occurred to Adelia that with the help of this elixir, it was possible to get rid of an infectious disease. The only thing the girl didn't understand was that if this elixir could be made, then why couldn't the wolf family just buy the elixir for money? This elixir was difficult to create and was not for sale. This time it was going to be given away as the main prize. It turned out that this elixir was created by Suradel, which is why Theodore showed such interest in the prize. Anyway, the guy couldn't take part because he was busy. He just wanted to watch other beastmen try their best to get this prize. Most people didn't like purebloods. The same thing happened with the Vale family. Despite the fact that they were the same beastmen, they were heavily discriminated against. People found their weakness funny, since the killer whales were forced to be near the sea, of course. After it became known about their magical abilities, the gloating retreated because a significant part of the continent was controlled by magic. Now Adelia understood why her dad got involved with the Vale family. Lord Lanos was also displaced until the magic tower gained power. To protect the world, you must be stronger than those who need chaos. Suradel didn't want the Vile family to be ignored any longer. Because of the guy's constant smile, Adelia didn't even know about his mental trauma. The girl approached him and said with a smile that everything would be fine because the Vile family had Suradel. Leah couldn't even imagine that someone would dare to show disrespect to the Vale family in front of the guy. He is an archmage, a magical swordsman, and also a walking combat weapon. One way or another, with the help of the elixir of life, it was possible to save the main character, Theodore. Unfortunately, the girl's hunting skills were not enough to win the prize, and something had to be done about it. Suradel said that there was no point in saying such sweet words. If someone else were in his place, he would immediately fall in love with the girl. Adelia didn't like the fact that if Suradel didn't participate in the competition, the wolf family would just take the prize. Kasatka assumed that the girl also wanted to compete for the prize, and she confirmed this. A vial of the elixir of life appeared out of nowhere. Suradel handed it to Adelia, giving it to her. The girl was shocked by the situation. Was it really possible to just give such things? But the guy replied that in no case to others, but to her it was possible. Suradel did not mind spending this elixir even on healing a paper cut, because he trusted Leah. The girl didn't like that the guy treated her so well, because she understood perfectly well that she could hurt him, at least because she was not a killer whale. She wondered how much his opinion would change when he found out she wasn't a killer whale, and besides, she would have to leave anyway. Suradel offered to make a deal in exchange for the elixir she would call him by his nickname. Adelia couldn't understand what the catch was. It was some kind of unequal deal. Since she really needed this elixir, she agreed. The girl warned that he himself asked to call him by his nickname, and for her it was quite advantageous. Besides, the nickname was not a nice one. In her imagination, Adelia imagined that she would refuse, and Suradel would give her the elixir as a precious stone, but everything turned out differently. The girl tried very hard to pronounce his nickname, but her tongue did not turn to call this guy that. With a smile on his face, the killer whale said that, as he thought, he liked the human Leah much more than the penguin Leah. The girl immediately cowered in fear, cautiously asking why he suddenly started talking about another Leah. As she thought, Suradel swore his love for the penguins, but in the end he preferred his own race. In the future, she will have big problems. Turning away, Adelia asked him not to talk about the other Leah in front of her anymore. The guy didn't understand whether the girl was jealous now. She walked ahead, and Suradel followed her. This situation was not typical for the female penguin, but for some reason it infuriated her. The Vale family mansion. They had barely entered the mansion when the butler appeared, asking if the couple had had a good time. It turned out that the head of the family had returned and was currently having a meal, so everyone was running around and fussing. Suradel was glad to see his father return and invited Leah to join him. The girl wondered if she could. Kasatka believed that of course it was possible, because the girl was their valuable guest, and besides, her father would certainly be interested in her. Adelia became curious about the character of the head of the family. Suradel said that he and his father were very similar, to which the girl quipped, saying that she no longer wanted to meet him. The guy corrected the girl. Since today she was really overdoing it, the female penguin began to justify herself by saying that she was just worried about meeting his father. She didn't want to seem rude, so she went and changed her clothes first. Seeing his guest in such a beautiful dress, which suited her very well, Suradel could not take his eyes off her. With a smile on his face, the guy said that Leah was the best beastman he had ever met. The girl took it as a compliment, but didn't answer, heading straight to the meeting. The dining room on that side of the mansion was perfect. Bella met the boys in the dining room, urging them to come in quickly and sit down at the table. First of all, Suradel introduced his companion. The girl had heard that the head of the Vale family was a blue whale. She expected the man to have a huge beard, since ancient times it has been a sign of strength and power. With a smile on his face, the man greeted the girl, saying that he was very pleased to meet her. Adelia couldn't believe her eyes. The head of the family didn't have a beard. It really shocked her. Yet the man exuded grandeur, as if he were the most enormous creature in the world. The girl introduced herself, and the head of the Vale family immediately invited her to the table, suspecting that she was hungry. All this time, Adelia felt the man's gaze on her, which made him very uncomfortable. Finally, Suradel noticed this, telling his father that he was embarrassing their guest. The man apologized for staring so hard, justifying himself by saying that he had not seen other killer whales for a long time. It had been 30 years since the mother was the last of the survivors. Orcas were incredibly rare and were all grouped into the Vale family. Usually, other beasts were divided into several families. For example, among the wolves there was a family of gray and Arctic wolves, and there was also a main family representing the race. Adelia knew that this question was unacceptable, but she risked asking it. She was interested in what happened to the killer whales, that there were practically no more of them left. Bella began to tell that initially there were many killer whales. Before this incident, the number of killer whales was enough to form a village. Something happened that could not be forgiven. It was all the damn sharks' fault. The woman promised to tell about it next time she had the opportunity, but for now, she advised Leah to beware of sharks, since they, by their nature, seek to kill killer whales. The head of the Vale family reassured the girl, as she had nothing to worry about, because as a killer whale, she could learn magic and be safe. Adelia was scared and upset. Even killer whales scared her, and here were sharks. And besides, magic was not under her control, so she could not resist the sharks. She thought about escaping from there early. After the meal, for some reason, he called Adelia alone. Initially, the man apologized for disturbing them during their rest, but he wanted to check something. From the very beginning, the girl seemed strange to him, so he immediately asked because she was not a killer whale. Judging by Adelia's reaction, he guessed right. The girl couldn't even imagine that she had been exposed, especially since they had only seen each other once at a meal. It turned out that the race of killer whales has its own hair specifics, and Leah's hairstyle was different from Bella's. Only Suradel was an exception to the rule. It was a small detail, so Bella didn't guess, but the chapter couldn't be fooled. He loved the woman so much that he was ready to risk his life. The man remembered that Adelia didn't yet know how to turn back, but there was one drug that could do it forcibly, but it was prohibited. He asked the girl to come closer, promising that he would not scold her. Fear was visible in her eyes. The head of the Vale family didn't know what Leah's intentions were, but he felt that she didn't deceive them with bad intentions. He realized this when he saw the girl spending time with Suradel. The man spoke so politely to Adelia, even though she had deceived his entire family. He began to use magic on the girl, promising that it would not hurt her. Since he already knows everything, Leah decided to tell everything as it is, saying that initially she did not intend to deceive anyone. The kidnappers themselves mistook her for a killer whale. The head of the family imagined how difficult the situation was. He promised that he would not reveal the truth until the girl did it herself. But he still asked the question. He needed to know what kind of animal Leah was, and she told him that she was a penguin. The man was extremely surprised, and he immediately guessed that the girl was the one Mr. Lanos was looking for. The female penguin burst into tears, confirming that she was the escaped penguin. The man laughed. He knew his son's passion for penguins, but the boy had a special attitude towards Mr. Lanos's penguin. Adelia didn't know what to do or say next, so she said that she believed that the head of the Vale family wouldn't tell anyone anything, so she would go. Suddenly, his voice became more serious, and he stopped the girl. The man asked to address him as Fremo, not the head of the house, and better yet, to call him priest. Adelia didn't expect such a turn of events. Only daughters-in-law could call someone that. The girl turned around and left. She realized that apparently they wouldn't kick her out. She could breathe a sigh of relief. Fremo thought about the fact that even he could not predict this. Everything was becoming much more interesting. Leah was filled with mana characteristic of Suradel. The head of the Vale family was even more surprised by the girl's vessel. It was difficult for an ordinary person to cope with Suradel's mana. It seemed that there was no limit to its volume. There was clearly something between them. Besides, it seemed that Leah wasn't afraid of his son at all. Usually, fear arose from the difference in power between the predator and the prey. It was the first time Fremo had seen such a calm beast in front of Suradel. Even he and Bella took a while to get used to it. Moreover, Leah was a tiny Adelie penguin. Whatever the reason, Suradel can't help but be interested in the girl. Unfortunately, she is not a killer whale. But the Vale family may have an interesting daughter-in-law. Leah came to Suradel asking if she could use magic. The guy probably didn't know, but he thought it was possible. Finally, the girl saw the benefits of the spirit. She thought about whether she should ask if she had mana like purebloods or the people of the Vale family. The female penguin's eyes were full of desire to learn. It had long been her dream to wave a magic wand. Adelia wanted to find out if the reason Suradel was interested in her was related to her mana. The guy advised to look into the library tomorrow. There was a lot of knowledge about magic there. The doors to any corner of the mansion were open to the girl. He had urgent business, so he would not be able to join Leah. The girl assumed that the guy was going to look for the missing penguin. She turned out to be right. He admitted that he really liked the penguin, and Mr. Lanos needed help. Although Adelia was worried, she pretended not to care, saying that she was going to practice turning into an animal anyway. Suradel gave the girl complete freedom of action, but asked her not to do anything dangerous while he was away. Taking out a small box, he presented it to Leah. There was a gift with a large, precious stone. In Suradel's arsenal, this was the only ring that could be adjusted in size, and it had summoning magic, so if something happened to the girl, she would be able to call for help. By whispering the summoning spell to Leah, he aroused the girl's anger. She said that if she had to say it, she would never use it in her life. It would be better for Suradel if there was no reason for the call. Opening the box with the ring, looking into Leah's eyes, the guy confessed that he fell in love with her at first sight. Will she be with him? The girl made a face and said that such a thing would never happen under any circumstances. Then, making a face, Suradel fell to his knees and said that this was all he had managed to steal this week, but it was very expensive, so he begged for mercy. Adelia appreciated this joke. She extended her hand and the guy put the ring on her finger. Making a sad face, Suradel asked to touch the girl's forehead before he left. It was suspicious. Was he really trying to joke again? Suradel calmly said that he just wanted to measure his temperature. But if Leah didn't want to, then it wasn't really necessary. But if she suddenly got sick, she would have to contact him immediately. The girl realized that the guy was sincerely worried about her. She herself took his hand and placed it on her forehead. He was taken aback and embarrassed. The next morning, Suradel headed to the magic tower early in the morning. Adelia couldn't say everything was fine. She just wanted to shout that the penguin he was looking for was at his house. To be honest, last night she had a fever and turned into a penguin, fortunately, without any hallucinations and fainting like before. This time, while Adelia was sick, one truth was revealed. While still unstable as a human, when she is psychologically weak, she turns into a penguin. During the day, Suradel was usually always with her, but at night, when she was completely alone, thoughts about her past life crept into her head. Was this really the only way to transform, and there would be no other? Adelia thought. Suddenly, Sir Kanu knocked on the door. He fulfilled the request, but what confused the girl was that the knight came with some kind of huge bag on his shoulder. It turned out that he was not confident that he would be able to persuade his sister, so he decided to act by force. Opening the bag, Adelia saw Ypres. The girl immediately rushed to help her maid. The barely alive Ypres only whispered that she should not come closer. It was too dangerous. The girl pounced on her brother. She was incredibly angry at the way he chose to bring her. It was scary to watch when cows fight seriously. It was the first time Adelia had seen a maid like this. She immediately began to apologize to her. She could not even imagine that her brother would go to such measures. She wanted to end it all right then and there, but since things had already gone this far, Ypres decided to ask why the killer whale needed her. If it was not something important, but just like that, the girl intended to leave, since she had to find her mistress, Leah. Adelia asked Mr. Hana to step outside for a minute. Now that the girls were alone, it was possible to talk. The female penguin was surprised that Ypres did not recognize her. She confessed that she was Adelia and that she was the penguin that everyone was looking for. The maid didn't even want to listen to such nonsense. She warned that if the mistress didn't stop, she would leave immediately and they would never see each other again. Taking Ypres by the hand, Adelia stopped her, asking if she remembered what she had told her before. The girls had a secret that only they knew. The maid told them about it without their father's knowledge. The secret was that the child of the tower's archmage, if not for the money, she would not have been here long ago. There was no way to know this because Ypres was new, and she accidentally broke her father's potion and tore the magic circle, and Adelia pretended it was her fault. Since then, the maid opened her heart to the girl and even told her secrets. The tattoo on her back was the name of her ex-boyfriend, and the umbrella was an iron weapon that allowed her to get rid of that same ex. When Ypres was young, she thought she would marry someone like Sir Kanu. The maid could not believe that Mrs. Leah was standing in front of her. Putting on a serious face, Adelia asked how Ypres could speak to her so coldly, since she thought the girl would recognize her immediately. Tears appeared in the maid's eyes, and she began to apologize for not recognizing her mistress right away. Ypres couldn't understand how her mistress had become such a fragile and sweet girl. She thought that if Adelia turned into a human, she would be the complete opposite. The maid asked why the girl left without saying anything, because she was very worried. Leah admitted that she also missed her and her father very much. Sir Hanu entered the room, but opened his mouth in surprise and screamed loudly, "Was Mrs. Leah really a penguin?" The knight began to justify himself, saying that he thought something had happened to his mistress because they had not come out for a long time. Adelia made her first order as a human, asking Ypres to take her brother with her so he wouldn't tell anyone. The most important thing that interested the lady was how her father was, whether he was healthy, whether he had any pain. Lord Lanos was in a terrible state. He was like a corpse that just walked back and forth. The entire magic tower was in confusion, looking for the young lady. Ypres didn't understand why Adelia had left. Had she really been kidnapped by this cunning killer whale? The girl said that she ran away herself at the moment when she suddenly became human, afraid of disappointing her father. She stayed here, where everyone mistook her for a killer whale. The maid did not understand why the mistress thought she had nowhere to go. She suggested that they return to the magic tower together. She couldn't, because she knew perfectly well that her father hated beastmen. Ypres tried to assure her mistress that her father would never hate her just because she was a beastman, because if that were the case, he would not have hired the maid. Adelia explained that her maid was a special case, with a special ability to quickly perceive the emotions of others, and she was hired because she could translate the penguin language. Sir Kanu intervened in the conversation. He was surprised that the lady spoke well. If she only recently became human, shouldn't she be bad at speaking? This question offended Adelia. She did not understand why this knight suddenly thought that she should not be able to speak well. Ypres corrected her brother, saying that her mistress was very smart and that her thoughts and actions as a penguin were on a different level than those of other animals. In any case, Adelia has already been caught by two people. In the future, she needs to be extremely careful. The maid assured the mistress that in any case, no matter what she accepted, she would be with her if necessary. She would leave the magic tower and find work here. Sir Hanu decided to joke by thanking Adelia for talking to his sister, and perhaps now she has lost her job. The girl decided that it was probably for the best that Sir Kanu had caught her. Plus, since she knew that she and Ypres were blood relatives, it was unlikely that he would expose her. Adelia decided that with the help of these two, she could come up with a plan to save the main character at the hunting competition that will take place next week. Time flew by. The day of the competition came. In fact, Adelia hoped that the main character, Anemone, would somehow show herself. Even though some things had changed, the story could still go as in the book. Ypres asked the lady if she needed to think more about the hunting competitions, as she was preoccupied with finding the young lady with the glowing eyes. In the end, Adelia needed to save Theodore. The question was whether she could actually save him and what would happen if he marked her. The girl had already prepared, but when she woke up in the morning, she realized that she had become a penguin again. She had so many plans, but the penguin couldn't carry them out. Was it because she was worried about Theodore? She had to think of something urgently, since the temporary maid would soon come to wake the girl up. Suradel knocked on the door. He wanted to see Leah before leaving. Without waiting for an answer, the guy began to enter. The female penguin decided to immediately hide under the bed. Adelia's heart almost stopped from the stress, but Suradel seemed to have left. But that didn't change the fact that she would have to hide until she became human again. With the help of magic, the guy took a picture of this painting, which he saw when he entered the girl's room. If Leah found out, she would probably be angry. But Suradel cast a relaxation spell, so Leah would forgive him for taking the photo. He knew that this little penguin would undoubtedly get into trouble, although that was part of her charm. After returning to human form, Adelia arrived at the hunting competition. Suradel, as usual, headed to the Tower of Magic, and Bella and Frimo were busy preparing for the competition. The girl decided that she would use this opportunity to save Theodore. Leah approached Bella to ask permission to go to the water with Hanu. Having stroked the girl's head, the woman happily let her go. She thought that Leah missed the water. The water zone was at the base of the mountain, so it should be safe. But just in case, she gave the girl a flare, in case of an emergency. In the original story, Theodore was attacked and fired a flare, but someone must have sabotaged the flare and it didn't launch. It was always better to take as many precautions as possible. Sir Hanu did not understand why his sister had tagged along with them. Ypres replied that her mistress had entrusted her with an important mission. The bag that the maid was carrying contained a robe and a mask. Ypres and his brother froze in bewilderment at what the mistress was going to do. The maid had potions in her hands. One changed the color of the eyes, and the second the voice. But the effect of this potion was only 15 minutes. Given that Ypres knows all about leaving a mark, physical contact with the skin was necessary for this to happen. Therefore, Adelia completely covered the exposed areas of her body, and by changing her voice and eye color, she prepared herself for any unforeseen troubles. Leah was sure that after such preparation, Theodore would never mark her. If someone marks simply because they were saved, it means that this someone is in love with their savior. Leaving a mark was simply a romanticized curse. Adelia gave orders to Khan and Ypres that from now on, even if they had any doubts, they would have to follow her orders. The girl and her companions headed deep into the mountains, where hunting competitions are in full swing and many dangers await them along the way. It seemed that Sir Khan was more afraid of being in the forest than the girls. He kept silent, repeating that there were animals of enormous size living here. A huge boar jumped out of the bushes at the travelers. It did not look like an ordinary wild boar. Its eyes glowed bright red, and the animal was more furious than it seemed. The girls entrusted the knight with dealing with this wild beast, and they themselves rushed further into the depths of the forest. Adelia understood that Sir Hanu was the knight who protected her. He was especially sensitive to her safety and could become an obstacle to her plans. The girl believed that the knight would deal with the mountain beast without any problems, so she was not so afraid for his life. The maid was very interested in what business her mistress had come to this forest for. Adelia's goal was to save the man, but the plot was quite different from the original, and Theodore may not even have been attacked. Ypres saw someone bleeding in the distance. It was none other than Theodore. Adelia was going to use a magic spell to find out whether the guy was alive or not. Luckily, Theodore was breathing, but it was still too early to relax. There was still one more dangerous element left. The remaining bandits could be located somewhere nearby. The girl was not going to back down. Despite all the dangers that could await her, she went to save Theodore. Ypres didn't know what her mistress's plans were, but she thought there was a deep meaning in it, so she believed her. Leah went to save the bleeding Theodore. She couldn't believe that the guy was fighting the bandits like that. If he wasn't moving, it meant he could be poisoned. Before Adelia moved, she spent a long time in the hospital, so she thought she was used to the sight of other people's wounds. The wound was too severe. It was necessary to quickly use the elixir that the girl had begged from Suradel. As soon as the elixir touched Theodore's wound, it immediately healed. It was a wonderful result. The victim grabbed the girl by the hand and asked what she was doing. Adelia didn't like this behavior. The behavior of the person she had just saved should have been different. The guy refused to drink the elixir, arguing that no one had ever saved him and he didn't need anyone's help. The girl couldn't believe her ears. She had to listen to all sorts of insults in order to save this bastard. She had humiliated herself before Suradel to obtain the elixir and had almost been exposed by him this morning. Besides, their gentle Sir Khan got it pretty bad. Adelia began to force the elixir onto Theodore, saying that she had to do so much to come here and she would not leave him to die, at least for her own sake. She forced the guy's mouth open and poured the elixir into him. A second later, Theodore had the strangest reaction. He pulled the girl close to him and hugged her. Could this really be what Adelia feared most of all? Looking into her eyes, the guy asked her name, the words sounding like a cliché. Ypres jumped out with an umbrella in her hands. She demanded that they take their hands away from her mistresses and, swinging, hit Theodore. With horror in her eyes, Adelia looked at the almost lifeless body. The maid recognized this guy as the same Theodore from the Wolf family. Ypres remembered the sudden wind and the young man's gaze. It was the very thing that Leah was so afraid of. The girl found it so romantic that her mistress saved Theodore's life, thus receiving the mark from him. Adelia did not understand such ardent admiration. For a start, she was going to make sure that the mark was present, since the guy lost consciousness during the imprinting. In addition, paying attention to Leah's clothes, it was impossible to contact her body. Ypres was sure that Theodore was strange. Because it was said that the mark was placed upon contact with the skin, the maid had a lot of information about the mark. It turned out that the girl got all this information from her past lover, who penetrated her body. This guy was the guild's information master, so the information about the mark was reliable. Ypres also knew that the beastmen from the Wolf family who were able to place the mark would have a moon pattern appear under their collarbone. Thanks to this, Adelia could verify that there was a mark on it, just like it was on the original. As expected, Ypres turned out to be much more useful than Sir Kanu. Approaching Theodore, Leah exposed his collarbone, and she did not see any moon-shaped pattern. The girl was very glad that this did not happen. She believed that it was due to her careful preparation for this meeting, and the maid was upset. She was hoping for a love triangle. Ypres wanted to watch the theater of love, two men courting a lady who had suddenly become human, young, handsome, and rich, a crazy fan of penguins who promised to embrace the whole world if Leah so desired. The wolfman who left his mark on his savior by entrusting her with his leash. Adelia didn't like all this at all. She asked her maid to stop making up such strange things. Ypres was already unstoppable. She believed that Mr. Suradel had a higher chance of success, because there were rumors that this guy from the Vale family had a crush on Leah. The girl was sure that Suradel was simply interested in her, since they were from the same family, since he thought that she was a killer whale. The maid tried to prove that the guy would be happy to learn that Adelia was a penguin man because he was obsessed with them. The girl was upset. She thought that if she was exposed, Suradel might hate her for deception. One way or another, all this would happen in the future. Now it was enough that Leah saved Theodore and was not marked. The flare was fired, so the knights who were waiting had to take the boy away. On the way back, the girls met Sir Khan. The knight was exhausted. It was clearly not easy for him. It turned out that the knight hated himself for not being able to find his mistress and his sister after launching the signal flare. Sir Hanu and Ypres were complete opposites in character, but both were so sweet that Leah knew that from now on she would have to use praise to get rid of her companion's grumbling. Returning to the competition site, the female penguin noticed some strange crowding. Adelia saw Bella. The woman was very excited. She ran up to the girl saying that she was looking for her. The female penguin saw Bella Vale so excited for the first time. The woman asked her where her flare was. Leah pulled out the flare she had taken from Theodore and showed it to Bella. The woman exhaled with ease. She was glad that the flare had not been fired by her guest. Judging by Bella's warm look and speech, she was really worried about the girl, and Leah was unintentionally deceiving her. Adelia was so ashamed of herself, she felt that she had no right to accept the love of the one who treated her so warmly and well. The female penguin was a little afraid because she was afraid that these people, who were already deeply imprinted in her heart, would find out who she was, become disappointed, and leave her. Bella remembered that she forgot to tell her how long the human form lasted. Leah must have been impatient to transform into an animal. The head of the Vale family heard from Suradel that the girl was still stable in the human body. Adelia confirmed this without telling that she had been forcibly reincarnated this morning. Bella remembered that there would soon be a succession ceremony in the Eagle family. After the ceremony, she promised that they would all go together to the Wellen family's estate, where Leah could calmly transform into an animal. In her mind, the girl asked Mr. Fremo for help because he knew the whole truth, but the man stood as if nothing had happened and was silent. After a while, he said that it was a good idea, and he would also be happy to go. At that moment, the ground went out from under Leah's feet. Bella forbade her husband to go, arguing that he needed to stay and sort out his work, but Mr. Fremo insisted that he should go and help with the transformation into a human. This conversation was interrupted by knights who loudly shouted for the road to be cleared. They had an urgent patient and needed a doctor. Those present immediately recognized the son of the wolf family, but people could not believe that Mr. Theodore was injured by a mountain beast. He was clearly attacked by someone. Adelia never thought that the hunting tournament would end like this, but there was nothing to be done, because there was an attack at the hunting tournament to bring families closer together. There were no traces of the criminal left. The bodies of the bandits were found, but this yielded no results. As Adelia was about to leave the room, she ran into Suradel, who asked where she was going. The girl said she was thinking of meeting her partner. Suradel couldn't believe his ears and asked again if he had understood correctly that Leah was planning a date today. The guy turned everything around in his favor, so much so that even Sir Khan was surprised that his mistress and the male killer whale were close. Suradel showed the ring as proof of his closeness with Leah. It turned out that they have matching rings. The girl was furious. It turned out that the ring that the guy from the Vale family gave her was a pair. Taking the ring off her finger, the girl began waving it around, indignant. She thought that Suradel had given her this ring because he was worried about her. The guy changed the subject, inviting Leah to introduce him to something amazing. She did not understand what was being discussed. Suradel promised to tell everything, but only after she asked Sir Hannah to leave them alone. Meanwhile, the knight watched this picture and thought how these two suited each other. When Sir Hanu left the door, Suradel approached Leah and said that, to tell the truth, He had long wanted to touch her hair. Since he had not seen hair the same color as his mother's for a long time, he thought it was amazing. The girl couldn't understand if he was using the excuse just to touch her hair or what just happened. Suradel carefully took a strand of Leah's hair and ran his fingers through it. The girl didn't understand why he was touching them so carefully. They were just hair. A couple of minutes later, a hairstyle formed on Adelia's head. She looked at herself in the mirror without taking her eyes off. It turned out that she had initially asked other people to do something similar. Suradel was glad that he could take part in this personally. Looking the guy in the eyes, the girl asked him to do the same for her tomorrow. With great joy in his eyes, Suradel agreed. It seemed strange to Adelia that his eyes looked at her, no matter in what form she appeared before him. It seemed that his courtesy towards her would not change. A second later, the girl tried to remove these thoughts from her head, convincing herself that when it was revealed that she was not from the cetacean family, everything would change. Leah thanked Suradel for everything, hoping that he would continue to smile. Sometime after the hunting competition, Adelia decided to tell Ypres everything about her reincarnation, and even that she had read a book about this world. After a long explanation, Ypres finally believed her mistress. Now it became clear to the maid why Adelia was unusually smart and incomparable, especially for a penguin. It must be quite strange to realize that the world you live in is from a novel, but in some ways Ypres took this information very calmly. While telling all this, Adelia tried to remember which family attacked Theodore, but she couldn't. Ypres didn't understand why the lady needed it. The guy was alive, which meant everything was fine. The maid reminded them that they needed to find a way to avoid raiding the whale's territory, and Leah wanted to check something about that. She was going to find out Suradel's true identity. Adelia confirmed that the events from the hunting competition actually happen in reality. This is why the extinction of purebred humans seems inevitable, since the plague will also appear. The girl needed more information to prepare. Ypres didn't understand why it was necessary to find out Suradel's identity if the lady wasn't sure that he was somehow connected with it. But the whale family was rarely mentioned in the novel. This seemed strange to Adelia, because with such an appearance the guy should have been at least a secondary character. Suradel was also very capable, with top-notch magical abilities and the best in combat. Ypres didn't want to admit it, but that's how it was. In the novel, only people could use magic. Adelia was going to infiltrate the island of the killer whales to find out when they started using magic. The maid asked if the mistress really thought that Suradel was in charge of everything. The girl couldn't answer this question. She just wanted to find out everything, since it all seemed suspicious. Ypres was always confused by something. She noticed that even the beastmen who were at the top of the food chain bowed their heads before Suradel. However, he did not have such an effect on Adelia. The girl never noticed it, but her servant, just the thought of it, sent shivers down her body, and the beastmen instinctively bowed down to him. Even as a penguin, Adelia was never afraid of Suradel or even any other beastman. Ypres suggested that the characteristic trait of Adelie penguins is fearlessness. The girl remembered that Frimo was fascinated by the fact that she had mana. Usually beastmen didn't have mana, so her characteristic was related to magic. Adelia decided to find out later. In any case, it was necessary to first collect more information in order to prevent the plague and save her father. Taking her mistress by the hand, Ypres promised to do everything in her power to help her. Since she worked in the tower, she had many pureblood people as friends. The maid could not let them die. Adelia suggested that if they couldn't stop the plague, they could find someone to make a cure. Some secret master who was good at healing, had powers, but was rumored to be crazy and eccentric. Perhaps Ypres knew that very man. Since the lady had entrusted the girl with her secret, she was obliged to justify her trust. Just as Adelia had once protected Ypres, so the girl had to protect her mistress. The female penguin was happy that there was someone who loved her regardless of species. Leah hugged her maid tightly and tenderly and confessed to her that reuniting with her was the best decision. Ypres was walking through the city to that very meeting when she unexpectedly met Suradel, who noticed that every day she wandered around the city in search of her master, and now she looked much more calm and relaxed. Had she really found what she was looking for? The maid was frightened by the surprise and immediately turned the question to the guy, asking if he had already given up, since he was so partial to their lady. The guy laughed stupidly. asking why he would suddenly look for a female penguin, since she was not in any danger at his house. Ypres's eyes widened in surprise. She was outraged that the guy knew everything and kept silent. Smiling, Suradel said that he knew everything from the very beginning because it was obvious to everyone who was with Leah. The guy asked when Ypres would stop working in the wizard's tower. She should be next to her master. The girl said that she had already resigned. Suradel promised to sort this out, telling Ypres to come to them, and he would register her as Leah's personal servant. She was very happy to hear this, however. She did not understand why the guy decided to help her. Smiling, he replied that it seemed to him that Leah would be comfortable with a familiar and close person, especially since she had been worried about something lately. Ypres immediately agreed, but Suradel had a condition that his guest would not find out about this conversation. The maid didn't like the idea of hiding anything from her mistress, especially something like this. With excitement in his eyes, Suradel asked Ypres if she herself wasn't curious about how Leah would react to finding out that he knew all this time that she was a penguin. For a second, the girl imagined this and came to the conclusion that in any case, her mistress would be very nice. Ypres asked that if everything became public when she was not around, Suradel should imitate Lady Leah's reaction for her. The man the girls were going to lived quite far away, and since he was Ypres's former lover, he probably went far away on purpose. The maid remembered the latest news from the castle. They said that Sir Theodore had not left his chambers since the hunting competitions. There was a high probability that the guy would not appear at the Orlov family's inheritance ceremony. Adelia was scared. She didn't understand what was happening because Ypres told her that the wound was not serious. The maid didn't know what to answer. The only thing she had in her head was the thought of a love triangle. Sir Kanu suggested to his sister that she tell him an old story about the beastmen. Adelia immediately asked to tell her this legend quickly. She thought that it was somehow connected with the original story. This legend was widely known among the beastmen of the continent, according to which the first beastman was a wolf. Once upon a time, there lived a wolf who fell in love with a human. He made a deal with a demon in order to become human and be with the girl he loved. The demon granted his wish, and it was time to pay the bills. The price was that the feelings the wolf had for his beloved would be passed on to his descendants. This is what a real mark is, which only appears on wolf beastmen when they see their chosen one. Their hearts beat wildly, and their chests are filled with emotions. It was only about marking. Adelia still didn't understand where the beastmen came from then. Sir Kanu added that this is precisely what is explained further. The legend did not have a happy ending. The black wolf and his beloved started a family. Unfortunately, people did not accept them, and the persecution became worse and worse. One day, people brutally beat this child. That day, the black wolf turned to the demon again. With tears in his eyes, he asked to fill the continent with beastmen so that no one would poison them anymore. Since then, ordinary animals began to turn into people. The demon's price was that the beastmen could not maintain their human form for longer than a certain amount of time. So the black wolf who made the deal directly had the shortest time span of all. Adelia was so amazed by this legend that she didn't even notice how they had already arrived. Ypres asked to leave this matter to her because she had to pull the wool over people's eyes. Adelia's eyes lit up. This was it, the information guild where her servant's person was. At first glance, the man who opened the doors of the pub looked very friendly, but as soon as he saw Ypres, his face immediately changed. Adelia's maid demanded in a commanding tone that the man take her to Jack right now. Going down to the basement, the stranger said that her people could not go any further and they should wait here, but Ypres was insistent, saying that they were her servants and they should go with her. With a menacing look, the man repeated that outsiders were not allowed to enter, and the maid made a displeased face because it had been different before. Jack was expecting only Ypres, and everyone else was forbidden entry. Adelia was a little worried. This place looked quite ominous. She kept fiddling with Suradel's ring in her hands, hoping that she wouldn't have to use it. Not even a second had passed before the tip of the sword was heading straight for Leah. Sir Khan had an instant reaction, and he immediately stood up to defend the lady. Ypres also arrived at the same time and started shouting what was going on here. The man repeated in a calm tone that outsiders were not allowed to enter. The maid began to shout that the talk was about others not being allowed in, not that the lady would be attacked and her life would be in danger. The man was frightened when he heard about the lady. Was it really a noble person standing in front of him? The master of the Information Guild and former lover of Ypres, Jack, was very worried. He rushed around the room, wondering how he looked, whether he should change clothes, and how to greet the guests in general. Sir Hanu thought the guild master would be scary, but it turned out to be quite the opposite. Ypres was angry. In front of her was the same pathetic Jack. He had not changed after their separation. The girl entered the office. She was already fed up with all this. She was not happy. She immediately told Jack that he almost injured Lady Leah. The guy tried to calm Ypres down, begging her to just talk. But she wasn't going to talk. She just demanded that she do her job. The maid introduced her mistress, indicating that she was the client. Adelia noticed that the guy could not get a word in edgewise. Jack was curious about something. After the penguin Renosa went missing, Ypres sent a letter to the master of the Information Guild. He did everything to find this penguin in the hope that the girl would forgive him. After a while, Jack noticed that the lady of his heart stopped looking for the penguin and began spending time with the killer whale. At that moment, Adelia wondered how much the guy was obsessed with her maid that he did not notice the obvious. The guy turned to Leah, asking what she had done that his soul forgot about the penguin so quickly. The girl decided to joke, noticing that he was jealous. She asked Ypres who she chose, her or Jack. The choice was obvious. The guy started shouting that Ypres promised to marry him, and in general, how could she choose someone she had known for less than 2 weeks without even thinking? The maid stopped Jack's whining by saying that if he didn't stop whining and get to work, she would leave. Leah had never seen her so bossy. The master of the Information Guild promised to take up the matter immediately and provide all the necessary information. Guild policy required a one-on-one conversation with the client, which made Adelia a little wary. The girl asked her maid to promise that if something happened to her, she would avenge her. The master went to prepare, and in the meantime, a soundproofing spell was cast on the room so that one could speak freely. The atmosphere changed abruptly. Adelia stood and thought about what to do, because even if she screamed, no one would hear. Something happened that she never expected. Jack began to beg Leah to help him and Ypres get back together. Adelia worried in vain. She calmly sat down on the sofa and said that this needed to be discussed personally with Ypres, and not with her. Ypres wanted only one thing from Jack: trust. Judging by what the maid told her mistress, she was serious, even preparing to marry the guy. Jack hid his biological species and continued to lie about it. The girl could not stand it anymore and left. Adelia didn't understand why the master of the Information Guild hid his biological species, but as he said, he was afraid of his beloved's reaction because he was the complete opposite of her type. Ypres's ideal was someone with unreadable blue eyes and hands that could withstand the cold. Jack's appearance was useful in managing the Information Guild. He never went against his nature. Adelia immediately guessed that the guy was a rodent. Birds hear the words of the day, and mice hear the words of the night. To be more precise, Jack was a field mouse. The only thing Adelia could advise was to go and confess this to her beloved. The guy dated her for so long, but he never realized that Ypres liked everything cute. Jack thought it was nonsense. In his opinion, the little girl never liked small animals. When they saw one, she didn't even glance at it, let alone pet it. Adelia explained that Ypres didn't pet them only because she was afraid of crushing them. She was much stronger, and she deliberately turned away because she was too excited by their cuteness. The female penguin was sure that her maid would like Jack's animal form, even if she didn't quite like him in human form. Adelia asked to leave this matter to her, but in exchange, the master of the Information Guild would take on her request. The guy was beside himself with happiness. He promised that if he could talk to Ypres again, he would tell her everything the girl wanted to know. Adelia's request was that Jack find someone who could make a cure for the plague, but since time was short, it had to be someone exceptional. The master of the Information Guild immediately realized that the girl needed a person who knew alchemy well. She needed a raccoon. They were known for their abilities in alchemy, but suddenly they dropped everything and disappeared. The raccoons have moved into the territory of the cetacean family. Just as whales gather on whale islands, most beastmen live where they are most comfortable, that is, in their natural habitat. Jack gave Adelia a map of the last place where the raccoons were seen. She had another reason to go to this stupid island. Now it's time for the Information Guild Master's reward. After leaving the office, Adelia asked her maid to just listen to Jack, as he had something to tell her. The guy began to beg for a conversation, swearing that it would only take a minute. April promised to listen to him only because Jack had been helping her a lot lately. The guy transformed into a mouse. Adelia explained that he hid his identity because he was afraid that his beloved did not like small animals. He was afraid that she would leave him. April promised to give Jack a chance. If he really liked her, then let him try to win her over. The field mouse was beside herself with happiness, and Adelia had to watch it from afar. A few days later, the night before the Orlov banquet, the female penguin was very angry. She could not untangle her hair. It was terribly tangled. Suradel became the girl's personal stylist, and she enjoyed it to the skies. Adelia went to look for help, but met Suradel at the Orador. She wondered where he was going so late. The boy was heading towards the wolf family, but it was surprising since it was late. Suradel explained that he was going to cast a healing spell on Theodore. Before leaving, Adelia asked the guy to tidy up her hair. She headed towards him, but stumbled and almost fell. Suradel caught the girl in time. Looking tenderly into her eyes, the guy warned that Leah needed to be careful.